It started with silence. Not the kind that came from peace or calm, but the kind that came after a storm had taken everything. Lena stood barefoot in the cold dirt outside a run-down boarding house, holding a sack that barely weighed anything. Her dress was torn at the hem, her hands red and raw. She wasn't crying anymore. That part had burned out of her a long time ago. Now, she just stood still, like if she didn't move, maybe the world would forget she was there. She had no people, no money, and nothing worth stealing. The women inside the house called her the preacher's mistake, though the preacher himself never once claimed her. Her mother had died when she was 10. After that, the only thing Lena learned fast was how to make herself small and quiet, how to move without being noticed. People had a way of turning kind when others were looking, then showing you who they really were when the doors shut. Lena knew this better than most. She trusted no one, not even the soft-spoken widow who had taken her in for a while and tried to treat her like a daughter, until the woman's grown son started staring at her the wrong way. Lena left in the middle of the night. Now, at 19, she didn't believe in mercy. It was something people promised, but rarely gave. She walked from town to town, taking small jobs cleaning or helping in kitchens. She kept her eyes down and her mouth shut. It was the only way to survive. The town of Dry Creek looked no different than any of the others. Dust and tired buildings. Men with hard eyes. Women with tight smiles. Lena figured she could get a few days' work at the tavern or maybe the church if they didn't look too close. She lied about her name, said she was Mary from Fort Worth. Nobody ever asked too many questions. Inside the saloon, the air smelled like old smoke and spilled whiskey. The owner was a woman named Elsie, big in the shoulders and quick to laugh, though her eyes didn't match the sound. Elsie offered Lena a room out back and work cleaning dishes. "You keep your head down," she warned. "There's a lot of men here think silence means yes." Lena nodded. She knew what silence could cost. It was on her third night that she saw him. He walked in quiet, like he'd been walking through a world he didn't trust for a long time. Tall, with broad shoulders under a coat that had seen too many winters. His boots were caked in red dust. His hat sat low, hiding most of his face. But his eyes, when they landed on her, didn't look away fast like most men's did. He looked at her like he saw something broken and didn't want to break it worse. He didn't speak, just gave Elsie a coin and took a seat in the corner. Lena didn't speak either, not to him. She didn't trust men who didn't talk. Quiet men had things they didn't want heard, but she couldn't help glancing at him. He came every night, never drank more than a glass, never touched a woman, just watched and listened. The other men laughed at him behind his back, called him the ghost cowboy, said he'd killed half a dozen men and gone down from the guilt. Lena didn't believe gossip, but she believed in guilt. She carried her own in her chest like a stone. A week passed, then two. Then came a night the sheriff walked in with a smile too wide for his face. "Got trouble heading our way," he told Elsie loud enough for everyone to hear. "That gang out of Clay County. Heard they're coming through." People stiffened. Lena kept washing dishes, but her hands shook. "Should I be worried?" Elsie asked. The sheriff shrugged. "Only if you've got something they want." Lena wanted to laugh. She didn't own a single thing worth taking. Later that night, she slipped outside behind the saloon, needing a breath. The stars above looked too sharp, like they might cut through the sky. She leaned against the wall and let the cold bite her skin. Anything to stay awake. Sleep brought dreams, and dreams brought memories. She didn't hear him come up, just felt his shadow fall across her. She turned. It was him, the silent cowboy. She straightened, ready to slip back inside, but he held out a hand, open, empty, no threat. Still, she didn't move. "I won't hurt you," he said, voice low like he hadn't used it in days. "You look like someone who's been hurt too much already." Lena stared. It wasn't the words. It was the way he said them, like he knew exactly what she'd been through. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice tight. "Nothing," he said, then paused. "Just didn't want you to be alone." Lena didn't believe in kind gestures, but something in his eyes, quiet and steady, made her pause. She didn't take his hand, but she didn't walk away either. That was the start. Over the next few days, she learned his name was Caleb. He didn't talk about himself much, but what he did share came slow, like a story he wasn't sure he had the right to tell. He'd been a Union scout during the war. Saw too much. Lost more. Afterward, he tried to build a life in Kansas, but the land didn't want him. Neither did the people. Said he didn't know how to live without looking over his shoulder. He didn't ask about her past. She didn't offer it. But they both understood the silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of the things they didn't know how to say. Then one morning, Lena woke up to shouting. Men on horses. Guns in the air. The gang had come. They rode through town like it belonged to them. The sheriff tried to stand them down, but he went down with a single shot. Elsie locked the doors. Everyone inside held their breath. Lena felt the old fear rise in her chest, the kind that turned her hands cold and her stomach hollow. But Caleb didn't freeze. He stood, calm as ever, and turned to her. "You trust me?" Lena looked at him, the man who never asked for anything, who'd never even touched her hand. She nodded once. He took her fingers gently in his. "You're safe now," he said. But safety had a price. And trust, she would soon learn, was a gamble that didn't always pay off. The gang didn't leave. That was the first thing that told Lena things weren't going to settle easy. They'd come in fast, shot the sheriff like he was nothing, then set up camp at the edge of town like they owned the land. No one dared move against them. Most of the townsfolk just stayed behind locked doors, waiting for the next blow to fall. Caleb stayed close to Lena. He didn't act scared, but there was something in the way he watched the streets, like he was measuring how long it might take to run, or how many shots he could fire before the whole place burned down. In the days that followed, Lena met people she'd never noticed before or hadn't thought much of. Some of them stepped out from the shadows, and others came riding in, drawn by trouble like moths to flame. There was Thomas Bright, a tall, well-dressed man who claimed he was a railroad surveyor but never carried a map or a compass. He had smooth hands, the kind that hadn't known real work in years, and eyes that flicked over Lena like he was sizing her up for something that had nothing to do with love. He smiled too easily and talked too much. Caleb didn't trust him. Neither did Lena, but she listened when he spoke, because people like him always said more than they meant to. Then there was Margaret Jensen, the preacher's widow, who came back into town just 2 days after the gang arrived. No one knew why. She had sharp eyes and a quiet mouth. Used to be she gave sermons better than her husband, and when he died, people said the Lord took the wrong one. She kept her hair pinned back tight and carried a silver locket she never opened. She looked at Lena like she remembered something about her past, something Lena didn't want remembered. A third came from nowhere. A young man named Eli said he was passing through on his way to Santa Fe, but he lingered too long at the saloon and asked too many questions about Caleb. Said he'd heard of a man who fit Caleb's description. Said he used to ride with someone called Whisperer, a name that didn't sound like it belonged to anyone decent. When Lena asked Caleb about it, he just looked at her, eyes tired, and said, "I don't go by that name anymore." Lena didn't press. Everyone had things they'd buried. Still, it made her wonder, what was Caleb running from? Why had he really stopped in Dry Creek? Each night, she and Caleb shared small moments, quiet words in the dark, watching the gang from the safety of the saloon, trying to figure out what they wanted. Lena grew used to his presence, the calm way he carried himself, like he could stand between her and the chaos forever. Sometimes he touched her hand, not to take anything, but just to remind her she wasn't alone. And that scared her more than anything, because Lena didn't know how to belong. Not really. One afternoon, while sweeping the back porch, Lena caught sight of Margaret Jensen speaking to one of the gang members, a man named Boone, with a scar across his jaw and cold blue eyes. Margaret handed him something wrapped in cloth. He nodded once, tucked it away, and walked off like nothing had happened. That night, Lena told Caleb. He frowned. "You sure? I know what I saw. What do you think it was?" "I don't know. Money, maybe. Or letters. Something secret." Caleb ran a hand down his face. That woman knows more than she's letting on. So do a lot of people, Lena said quietly. Caleb looked at her, and for a second, she saw something raw in his face. You think I'm hiding something too? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. He turned away and went back inside. The next morning, Thomas Bright was found beaten behind the stables. Someone had gone through his things, though nothing was taken. At least, not anything anyone could see. Thomas didn't accuse anyone, just packed his bags and left without a word. Lena watched him ride off, wondering if he'd even been a surveyor at all. Later, Margaret came into the saloon and sat beside Lena. "You're not from around here," she said, not asking, just stating it. "No," Lena said. Margaret sipped her tea. "Men like Caleb, they don't stop for long. You might want to remember that." Lena didn't answer. She wanted to say she didn't care, that she didn't need anyone. But the truth was she had started to care, and that truth made her angry. Outside, Eli was talking to one of the gang members. Caleb saw it too. He pulled Lena aside. "That boy's stirring something up. I don't like it." "He's looking for answers," Lena said. "So was I. Look where it got me." He didn't say more. That night, Caleb didn't come to the saloon. Lena waited. She asked around. No one had seen him. Her stomach twisted. She didn't want to admit she was scared, but she was. She found him the next morning behind the old church, bruised and bloodied. "What happened?" she whispered. "Eli," Caleb said through his teeth. "He's not just passing through." "What is he?" "A bounty hunter. Said there's a price on my head." Lena's heart thudded. "Is it true?" Caleb didn't answer right away. "Then, years ago, I rode with a gang. I got out, tried to fix things. Didn't fix enough." "Did you kill someone?" "Yes," he said. No hesitation. "But not the way they think." That was the moment Lena knew the town wasn't the only thing full of lies. Caleb had come to Dry Creek to disappear, but trouble had followed him anyway. And now she was tangled in it too. She didn't run. Instead, she found Eli herself. "What do you want?" she asked him. "Justice," he said without blinking. "Or payday?" He smiled. "Both." She swallowed. "If he's done what he says, he already paid." Eli tilted his head. "You really believe that?" "I believe he saved me. That doesn't erase the blood." Lena didn't argue. She just walked away. By the time she returned to the saloon, Caleb was gone. No note, no trail. Elsie said he left at dawn. Lena stared at the empty seat in the corner where he used to sit. Her chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with something she didn't dare name. Margaret appeared beside her again. "He's not the only one with ghosts," the woman said. Lena looked at her. "Why did you give that gang member the package?" she asked. Margaret didn't flinch. "Because they knew something about my son, something I couldn't afford to let out." "So, you paid them to stay quiet?" "I paid them to leave him out of it." Lena felt her stomach sink. "Your son's one of them?" "He was," Margaret said quietly. "But not anymore." Lena said nothing. She just stared at the glass in her hand, trying to figure out what it all meant. Everyone in Dry Creek had secrets. Some ran from theirs. Others made deals to protect them. Caleb had tried to do both, and now he was gone. But something told Lena this wasn't the end. It was only the part where people started showing who they really were. Days stretched without Caleb, each one heavier than the last. Lena kept working at the saloon, not because she cared for the job, but because it was the only thing keeping her from falling into the hole he left behind. She didn't ask if anyone had seen him. She didn't want to hear the word no again. But the truth hung over her like smoke. Caleb had left. He had disappeared just like everyone else she'd ever let close. Only this time, it was different. He hadn't taken anything from her. He'd given something instead. A piece of quiet. A little safety. A kind of care she didn't know how to name. Still, life in Dry Creek didn't stop. The gang's presence lingered like rot. Boone and the others didn't kill anyone else, but they made sure the town stayed scared. They came into the saloon sometimes, tossed coins at Elsie, and called her ma'am, like it made their hands clean. Lena avoided them. She kept her head down. But she listened, always listened. She overheard them talking about someone coming. A boss. Someone higher up who didn't like the delay. who expected more than just fear. They said it like a warning, not just to each other, but to the whole town. One night, after closing, Elsie sat down beside Lena. She poured them both a glass of warm cider, something she usually kept for herself. "You're holding up better than I thought," she said. "I'm used to trouble," Lena replied. "That don't mean you gotta carry it alone." Lena glanced at her. "You think he's coming back?" "I don't know," Elsie said. "But I think he left to protect you." "I didn't ask him to." "No, but maybe you needed it anyway." That night, Lena didn't sleep much. She thought about the way Caleb had looked at her, not like someone broken, but like someone who'd been made strong by surviving. She thought about what it had meant, him taking her hand and saying, "You're safe now." That promise had been more dangerous than any bullet, because she'd started to believe it. She couldn't afford to believe in things that vanished. A week passed, then two, and then, without warning, Caleb walked back into the saloon. He looked rough, bruised, dirt-smeared, coat torn at the shoulder, but he was alive. And when his eyes met Lena's, something in her chest cracked open. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded once and sat in his usual corner. Lena brought him water without being asked. "You ran," she said quietly. "I thought I was doing the right thing. You left." "I know." She sat across from him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, softly, Caleb said, "There's a man coming. Calls himself Carver. He runs that gang." Boone answers to him. "You talked to them?" "No. I follow them. Listened. They're planning to bleed this town dry before winter. Carver wants more than money. He wants power. Why Dry Creek? Because it's quiet. Because no one will fight back." Lena stared at the table. "Are you staying?" "I don't want to run anymore," he said. "But if I stay, you're in danger." "I'm already in danger." Caleb reached across the table, resting his hand over hers. His skin was rough, but his touch was careful. "I came back because I couldn't stop thinking about you." Lena's throat tightened. She didn't cry. She never cried. Instead, she turned her hand under his and gripped it. "Then stay. But don't lie to me again." "I won't." That was the first victory. Small, but real. After that, things shifted. Caleb started helping around town. He fixed the broken window at the church, helped Elsie reinforce the saloon doors. People began to look at him differently, not like a ghost, but like a man who might actually give a damn. Lena found herself laughing more. Not loud, but real. She caught Caleb watching her, sometimes with a look that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she was something worth holding on to. They share more now, stories of what came before. Lena told him about the preacher's house, about how the women whispered that she was a burden God forgot to take. Caleb told her about Kansas, about the boy he couldn't save, the boy who'd looked at him like a father and died in his arms during a botched raid. "I thought I could fix it," he said one night, as they sat on the back porch. "But I didn't know how." "You can't fix everything," Lena said. "But you stayed. That's something." He leaned his shoulder against hers. "I'm scared I'll fail again," he admitted. She turned her face to his. "I'm scared if I let you in, you'll leave again." They didn't kiss that night, but it felt closer than anything they'd done before. The next day, Carver arrived. He came with 6 more men, all dressed in black coats, all carrying rifles like they didn't care who saw. He was clean-cut, polite, smiled at the mayor, bought a round at the saloon, told everyone he was just here to help settle some business. But everyone knew the truth. That night, the gang took over the town hall, set up guards on the streets. People stopped going outside. The fear was heavier now. It had shape and a name. Lena watched Caleb carefully. He didn't break, but he got quieter, more thoughtful. "We can't beat them with guns," he told Elsie and Margaret one night. "But we might be able to outsmart them." "How?" Margaret asked. "Carver's here for something. We need to find out what." Lena had a guess. "Margaret," she said slowly, "what was in that locket?" Margaret froze. "What?" "The one you always wear. The one you never open." Margaret hesitated. Then, with trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a faded photo, a young boy, and next to it, a letter. Lena took it gently and read the first line. "Carver is not his real name. His birth name was Samuel Jensen. Margaret's voice was barely above a whisper. "He's my son." Elsie stepped back. Caleb didn't move. "You knew this day would come," he said. "I hoped it wouldn't." Lena's heart was racing. "Why didn't you say something before?" "Because I thought he'd changed. Because I wanted to believe that." The letter was a confession. Years ago, Samuel had been caught up in bad business. He left town, joined up with outlaws. He sent his mother one letter, begging for forgiveness. That was the last she heard of him, until now. Caleb folded the letter and put it in his coat. "This changes things." "No," Lena said. "This makes things clearer." They had to act, not with violence, but with truth. Lena and Caleb went door to door, telling the townsfolk what they'd learned. Some didn't believe. Others were too scared. But a few, enough, were willing to stand up. They formed a plan, a trap, and Lena, for the first time, felt hope start to burn her chest. But hope, she knew, could be dangerous. Because if it failed, if Caleb fell again, or if Carver proved too strong, it wouldn't just break the town. The plan was simple, and that was what made it dangerous. They would corner Carver during Sunday church service, when he expected the town to be docile and blind with fear. Caleb would confront him with the letter Margaret kept hidden all these years. The townsfolk, those few who still had fire left, would close the doors and block the exits. They would make him choose, leave Dry Creek or face the truth of who he really was in front of the people he was trying to control. But simple plans break fast when fear gets in the way. 2 days before the service, Boone found out something was off. No one knew who let it slip. Maybe it was the boy who helped Caleb hammer a new plank on the church steps. Maybe someone's face changed when Boone passed by. All it took was one cracked word, one shift in the air, and suddenly the gang moved faster. The saloon was the first target. They kicked the doors in just after midnight. Shattered glass, splintered tables. Caleb got there just in time to pull Lena out the back, but Elsie wasn't so lucky. They held her upstairs, said she'd be fine, as long as no one tried anything foolish. Lena wanted to scream. Caleb held her tight in the alley behind the building, his heart pounding against hers. "This is my fault," she breathed. "No," he said. "It's mine. I should have stayed hidden." She pushed away. "You should have stayed here. With me. You knew this would happen. I didn't think they'd move this fast." "You didn't think," she snapped. "That's the problem. You thought you could fix everything with a letter and a few brave words. You forgot that men like Carver don't give up power. They bury it in the ground." Caleb didn't argue. He just looked tired, broken in that quiet way that doesn't show in the eyes, but in the slump of the shoulders and the silence that follows. They didn't sleep that night. They couldn't. By morning, the town was crawling with tension. Carver had taken over the church, turned it into a fortress. Boone and the others patrolled the streets. No one went outside. No one dared speak loud. Margaret was kept under watch. They didn't hurt her, but they made it clear she wasn't to leave her home. And the letter, the one piece of truth they had, was gone. Stolen from Caleb's coat while he slept in the barn, too tired to notice the quiet hand that slipped in and out without a sound. Lena felt hope slipping again, like it always did. She tried not to hate herself for believing in it. Caleb blamed himself, of course. She could see it in his face. The way he stared at his boots, the way his voice got smaller when he spoke. "I thought if I gave him a way out, he'd take it." "You think monsters walk away just because you show them the door?" Lena asked. "No. I think they only walk away when they know someone's willing to burn the house down behind them." The next complication came swift and hard. Eli returned. It would break her. He rode into town like a shadow that had never left. And this time, he wasn't smiling. He carried a badge now, worn, been at the edge, but official. And with it, an order from the territory judge. "Caleb Bishop," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You are wanted for robbery and the murder of Deputy Ross Leland in Kansas Territory. I've come to bring you in." Lena's heart sank. Caleb didn't flinch. He stepped forward, hands open, voice calm. "That was years ago. Still on paper," Eli replied. And the paper still talks. Lena stepped between them. He saved this town. He also took a life. Eli said, "You don't get to undo that just because you kissed the right girl and fixed a few fences." Caleb didn't deny it. He just said, "I'll go, but not now. You don't make the rules, Bishop." "I do," Carver said, appearing behind Eli like a rattlesnake in the tall grass. "Because this is my town now, and no lawman's badge means anything unless I say it does." Eli turned, surprised. "You planning to stop me?" Carver smiled. "No, I'm planning to bury both of you if you don't leave before nightfall." Eli blinked. "You threatening a man of the law?" "I'm threatening a man who stuck his nose where it doesn't belong." Lena pulled Caleb back. "This is falling apart," she whispered. "No," he said. "This is what falling apart looks like before it starts to come together." But she wasn't so sure anymore. Later that night, after Eli slipped out of town without Caleb, too smart to die for justice in a place that no longer had it, Lena found herself sitting in the dark beside Margaret. "I lied," Margaret said quietly. Lena didn't answer. She was getting used to the sound of lies. "The letter," Margaret continued, "I gave it to Carver. I thought if he saw how far he'd fallen, he might come back. He was my son." Lena swallowed. "You thought you could shame a wolf into growing teeth for the lambs." Margaret didn't cry. She just said, "I was wrong." Lena stood. "You should have burned the letter." "I know." The next day, Carver made an announcement. He was taking what he wanted and leaving by sundown. If anyone got in the way, they'd be dragged behind their horses for miles. Caleb stood outside the saloon, watching him. "They're scared," Lena said. "So am I," he replied. "What do we do?" He looked at her with those eyes that always made her feel like maybe she mattered. "We stand." "That's it." He nodded. "That's everything." Lena stepped forward, stood beside him. Then Margaret joined them. Then Elsie, bruised and limping, but still proud. One by one, others came out of their homes. Not many, but enough. Carver laughed when he saw them. "Is this your army?" he mocked. "No," Caleb said. "This is your mirror." Carver's smile dropped. He drew his gun, and just like that, the stillness broke. Shots rang out. Dust flew. People screamed. But the town didn't run. They fought. Lena ducked behind a barrel, her hands shaking. She wasn't made for this. She wasn't brave. She wasn't strong. But she saw Caleb go down, just for a second, and something inside her snapped. She picked up a fallen pistol and aimed. Carver was charging Caleb, eyes wild. She fired. The shot cracked like thunder. Carver dropped. Everything stopped. Boone froze. The others dropped their weapons. Silence rolled through the street like a second shot. Lena didn't move. Her hands were still shaking. Caleb pulled himself up, limping, blood on his side. He looked at her, eyes wide. "You saved me." She didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. She just walked him and held on. People gathered around. Someone tied Boone up. The rest of the gang scattered. It was over, but something else was just beginning. Rain fell the next morning, soft and steady, washing the blood and dust from the streets like the town itself was trying to forget. But some things don't wash away so easy. Carver's body had already been taken out by wagon. No funeral, no goodbye. Just a sheet and silence. His men were either jailed or scattered to the wind, and for the first time in years, Dry Creek felt like it could breathe again. But Lena couldn't. She stood alone by the window upstairs in the saloon, arms wrapped tight around herself, watching water trace down the glass. Her body still ached from the fight, but it was her chest that felt the heaviest. Somewhere down there, Caleb was helping Elsie patch the front steps. People were already trying to stitch their lives back together. It amazed her how quick folks moved on, how fast the town went from battle to breakfast. But she wasn't ready, because something had cracked inside her when she pulled that trigger. Not because she regretted it, but because it felt too easy, and because the girl she used to be, the one who walked barefoot through the preacher's cold house, was still somewhere deep inside, staring at her hands and whispering, "You're not meant for peace." She didn't go downstairs until dusk. Caleb was waiting for her outside, coat damp, hat pulled low. I figured you needed space, he said gently. She nodded. I didn't want to be looked at like a hero. No one's doing that. Good. She swallowed. Because I don't feel like one. He didn't press her. Just said, walk with me. They walked in silence out past the edge of town, down the path that curved around the creek. The same path where weeks ago, she'd first heard his voice say, "You're safe now." Back then, those words had felt like a promise. Now they felt like a lie. They stopped near the old wagon bridge, the wood creaking beneath their boots. Caleb leaned against the rail and looked out at the gray sky. You remember what I said about Kansas? He asked. About that boy? She nodded. There was more to it. He wasn't caught in the crossfire. I hesitated. Just a second. I was supposed to cover him, but I froze. Thought I saw someone I recognized in the other gang. And by the time I fired, it was too late. Lena turned to him, but he didn't meet her eyes. That's the part one carry. The part one never told anyone. That boy's blood is on my hands because I doubted myself. Lena's voice was barely a whisper. You think that makes you a monster? I think it makes me broken. She took a step closer. Then I'm broken too. He finally looked at her. I've hated myself so long, I don't even know what it feels like not to. I've slept in strangers' barns and been spit on by women with clean hands. I've stolen food. I've lied. I've let good people die just because I was too scared to act. But that day at the saloon, she paused, voice thick. I didn't freeze. I saw the man who hurt this town, who hurt Margaret, who used to be somebody's baby. And I pulled the trigger. Caleb said nothing. Lena blinked, tears rising fast. And I'd do it again. She looked away, ashamed, until Caleb gently touched her arm. Then maybe we're both monsters, he said softly. But I think we're something else too. Survivors. Fighters. People who did what they had to when no one else would. She leaned into him, forehead resting on his chest, letting herself shake. I keep thinking about what comes next, she whispered. What do people like us do when there's no fight left? He wrapped his arms around her. We learn how to live. It sounded impossible, but standing there, with his heartbeat steady beneath her ear and the rain easing off around them, she wanted to believe it, even if she didn't know how. Later that evening, back in town, Margaret opened the church doors herself. No ceremony, no preaching, just quiet, soft candlelight and a few mismatched pews. People trickled in, not to pray but to sit, to breathe, to remember. Lena sat beside Elsie. Caleb stood in the back. No one said much. Then Margaret stepped up front. I failed my son, she said, voice trembling. I failed this town. I thought hiding the truth would protect people. I was wrong. No one corrected her. I don't expect forgiveness, she continued, but I will not hide anymore. Lena watched her with something like admiration, maybe even understanding, because hiding never did save anyone. After the service, Lena found herself walking through the graveyard behind the church. No headstone for Carver, but plenty of others. Some marked, some not. She stopped in front of the smallest one. No name, just a wooden cross. I buried my baby here, she said, not expecting anyone to hear. But Caleb had followed. I know, he said quietly. I never told anyone. You just did. She turned to him, wiping her face. I didn't think I deserved love after that. You do. How do you know? Because I do too. She didn't answer, just took his hand. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like holding on out of desperation. It felt like beginning. They walked back to town together, not talking, just listening to the night. The sky had cleared. The stars looked sharper than she remembered. She couldn't explain it, but something had shifted. Not just in her, but in the town, in the world around them. Not everything had healed, but healing had begun. And maybe that was enough. Spring came early to Dry Creek that year. It crept in slow, in the small ways first. The frost pulling back from the grass, the dirt roads softening under the sun, the creek swelling just enough to carry its song further through the valley. The town, like the land, seemed to stretch awake after too long curled up in fear. Words came off windows. Doors stayed unlocked. And people began to greet each other again, not just with nods, but with names. Lena found herself walking different now, straighter with her chin up. She still flinched at sudden noises, still had nights where sleep wouldn't come, but the shadows didn't wrap so tight around her anymore. The saloon reopened under Elsie's care. She'd scrubbed the blood from the floor with her own hands, then painted the walls a pale yellow that looked like morning light. Lena helped her hang new curtains. It felt silly, folding fabric while the memory of gunfire still echoed in their bones. But it mattered. It said we lived. We're still here. Margaret, too, began to change. She came into town daily now, walked with purpose, and looked people in the eye. She started a small garden behind the church, digging each furrow like it was penance. Caleb helped her carry sacks of seed. He never said much, but Margaret would nod in quiet thanks, and that was enough for both of them. As for Caleb, he stayed. Lena hadn't asked him to, and he hadn't promised. He just never saddled his horse again. He took up work fixing fences and hauling water, always the first to help, but never drawing attention to himself. Folks began to trust him in a way people do when you prove yourself by showing up again and again, not with words, but with presence. One morning, Lena found him sitting outside the blacksmith's, holding something small in his hand. "What's that?" she asked. He opened his palm. It was a ring, rough, made from braided silver wire. Not store-bought, not fancy, but made with care. "I've never done this before," he said quietly. "You don't have to. I want to. But I understand if you're not ready." She looked at it, then at him. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but something gentler. Something scarier, too. "I ain't never been anyone's wife," she said. "I've never been anyone's husband. I've been home before. I've been used. So have I." She stared at the ring again. "You sure you want someone with all this behind her?" He smiled. "I want someone who knows how to fight, and stay, and forgive, even if it takes time." She didn't say yes, but she took the ring and slipped it in her pocket. And that was enough for now. Weeks passed. The town held a gathering on the first Sunday of May. Not a real holiday, but a kind of celebration. No preacher stood at the front. Just food, laughter, music. Margaret played piano for the first time in years. Caleb joined a game of horseshoes. Children ran barefoot through the square. Lena brought a pot of stew, the same kind her mother once made before life turned cruel. She sat on the table, stepped back, and looked around. There was a hush in her chest, like a space that used to be crowded with pain had opened up to hold something better. Not joy exactly, but peace. She found herself watching the faces of the people. Elsie laughing with the blacksmith. Margaret handing out lemonade. A young couple dancing slow beneath the awning, their feet unsure but their eyes locked. And Caleb, sitting on the edge of it all, calm, settled in his bones. After the sun went down and lanterns lit the porch rails, Caleb found her near the edge of the creek. She was barefoot, toes in the grass, skirt hiked just above her knees. "You think this lasts?" she asked. "I think we make it last," he said. She turned to him. "Then I think I'm ready." He didn't smile big, didn't speak loud. Just stepped closer and reached for her hand. She pulled the ring from her pocket and gave it back to him. He slid it on her finger with care, like it might break if handled wrong. They didn't speak vows. They'd said what needed saying already, in blood and dust and silence. They just held each other. That night, under a sky full of stars, Lena walked back into the church alone. She sat in the front pew, looked up at the old wooden beams, and breathed deep. "I forgive you," she said quietly, though no one was there. It wasn't just for Carver. It was for the preacher who turned his back on her, for the women who whispered, for the girl she used to be, for herself. "I forgive you," she repeated. And this time, she meant it. She lit a candle and left it burning. In the months that followed, she and Caleb built a small home at the edge of town. Not much more than a cabin, but it had a porch, a stove, and a bed made for two. Caleb crafted a shelf for her books. Lena planted wildflowers along the path. Sometimes she'd wake early and watch him sleep, the worry gone from his brow, his chest rising steady. She'd touch the curve of his jaw and feel something settle in her that had always been restless. She wasn't scared anymore. Not of the dark, not of love, not of herself. One morning, she walked into Margaret's garden with a bundle in her arms. Margaret was kneeling in the soil, coaxing new shoots from the ground. She looked up, and her face went soft. "A baby?" she asked, voice full of wonder. Lena nodded. "Her name's Rose." Margaret stood slowly, her hands dirty, and reached out to take the child. "You named her after your mother," she said. "No," Lena said gently. "I named her after the first thing that grew back after winter." They stood there a while, 3 generations held together by soil, silence, and second chances. And across town, Caleb fixed a loose shutter and looked toward the hills. The wind carried the scent of fresh bloom and far-off rain. He smiled just a little. Life would never be perfect, but it was theirs, and that finally was enough.